Lazaro Rodriguez. I'm a firefighter paramedic. I've been with Hillsborough County for 10 years. Since 2015, I've been in the Special Operations Division doing heavy rescue. John used to do that too. So a lot of trauma, a lot of vehicle extrication. So blunt trauma is kind of my thing. I'm a registered nurse as well. I worked in the ER for a while. And I'm a super green skydiver, and I'm really bad at it. But Lisa asked me if I wanted to contribute my point of view, so I'm super grateful to do that. Super humbled to be here.
So we have two perspectives from when we're responding. Laz is totally like on the scene, first response, and that's what he does all the time. Where I'm thinking a lot of, what to expect, what the next steps are. I'm thinking what the hospital is going to need. So that's just why we thought we would be a great combination for this.
Cool. So, and thank you guys all for being here. I have notes in my pocket that I really like.
So we thought this was a great one because I will say that almost everyone I respond to, if they can still talk, this is what they're asking.
Yeah, so knowing your limits, like not skydiving limits, but like physical limits, right? If you're already hurt and then you come back out and start jumping again, the ability to injure yourself worse is much higher. Small fractures become big fractures, etc.
But also knowing your limits otherwise, weather and everything else too. If you see Sally Hathaway, you see Bobby Clark, you see experienced skydivers telling you that it's windy and they don't want to jump, then that's not the time for the 25 jump wonder to say, I got my A license and I can make my own decisions. Like really listen and look at your surroundings and look at the people that are experienced and see what they're doing. When Aaron Stoughton tells you, it's really kind of getting nasty there, that's not the time to go off and say, I'll just get one more in. Because, better decisions, before you go up, just prevention. Like prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as my mom always said, so that is the truth.
I'm not very good at like the hold your hand kind of stuff. Lisa's super caring and, long-term care. I'm more like, are you okay right now? So we're gonna do a little bit about what you're gonna need in the future, but we're gonna focus on controlling ourselves so we can control other people, and then we're just gonna talk about life safety stuff. So, Lisa knows
So here's
all
the
about
most common things that we see. We respond, twisted ankles, kind of injuries that require, just, resting the first thing, not getting right back up on the plane when your ankle's swollen, and, maybe you can still put pressure and it's not broke, but you still need to rest, ice, we call it RICE, elevate, compress, and, just do those basic things, and go home and do this.
Yeah, go home and rest. Super important. Just for a second, because this comes into people's minds sometimes, and it's not something you want to have to worry about a lot. Good Samaritan laws, what can I do to people? Like, can I put my hands on someone without their permission? Basically, if you didn't cause someone to be harmed, you're acting reasonably in a way that you can, defend that you're just trying to help someone. And it's actually an emergency, then you're gonna be okay. Myself, as a medical professional, Lisa also, anyone here who's a medical professional, we're also covered under this, but only to the extent that any of you are covered, right? So I can't come out here and intubate somebody, I can't start IVs and start giving meds or anything like this. So give yourselves, credit, because anything that I can do in emergency out here on the field is the same things that you guys can do legally, right? So just as far as that goes, something to throw in to think about.
Go a little further into that.
All right.
Talk about if they decide to do chest compressions or something and
Yeah.
kill them.
So these are,
You
if
kill
you're,
somebody accidentally.
if you're doing chest compressions on someone, then they're already dead, right? So something that we say often in the fire department is that someone dying or someone being injured is not my responsibility. It's not my fault. We're there to affect whatever change we can. So as much as you guys can help and are able to help, if you have some kind of training that you can apply, then go for it. You know what I mean? Just use reason. It's something that you may have to defend later, but this also is something that we're gonna talk about a lot, where less is more, right? If you don't know if something is a good idea, just like in skydiving, maybe don't do it. But we'll get into that further as we go along. What are good decisions that we can make to keep ourselves not just out of trouble, but to affect good change for patients. And whose emergency is it, right? So if someone gets hurt in the landing area, that's not my emergency. And everybody else that's here, it's not your emergency either. The only person experiencing an emergency is the person that got hurt. So the moment you start to make it your emergency, you start to get excited, you start to get emotional, or you start to move too quickly, you can't be effective in solving an emergency once you've involved yourself in it. So calm down
And we see that. Everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to get in and have a part of it. And like Les said, sometimes less is more. Have the most, knowledgeable people around the person that's hurt, because we kind of know what questions to ask. We know what report to give to EMS so that when we get there. There are valuable seconds that patient or that person that was hurt could be awake and before they lose consciousness, and there's things that we know to ask them that we can give in report when EMS gets there. It's really important. What really you could look at is the mechanism of injury. Like you're saying, I saw them hit on this side, like if the person can't talk, they collapsed, or what direction they hit, where they hit, how fast they were going. That's stuff that you can look at and give. It's really valuable information. But as far as the person like being hurt, keep the most experienced people that can answer, because we don't want to waste that time that they could be awake and get valuable information.
I want to talk to you guys a lot about staying calm. Like, it's going to be redundant, and you're probably going to be over it because you want to hear, like, how do I stop the bleeding, right? But 90% of the time, there are going to be situations where the best thing to do is not really do much, So what happens in the fire department too, we see a lot, is that we all want to help, right? We all are filled with good intentions, but you can't be afraid of inaction. If you get to someone who's hurt, they're talking, they're breathing, leave them where they are, and start talking to them. The most important thing to do in your assessment is start asking questions. Once you get past, are they breathing, and some of these things. So calm yourself down. If you want to control others, you have to be able to control yourself first. So the baby steps, right? Control yourself. However fast you're moving, slow down a little. So not long ago, I had to jog out there, jog on out to the landing area, and I had to tell myself, hey man, slow down a little. If I get there and I'm breathing fast, my heart rate's up, I'm slightly hypoxic, maybe I'm not making my own good decisions anymore, my fine motor skills are gone, right? So whatever you're doing, just do less.
And also for the person that's hurt, if they see everybody getting crazy, they're gonna get worked up. They're gonna be like, oh, this shit's real. Like, oh, I'm really, and then they get their heart rate start going. They start breathing faster than they need to. They want to start moving because their nervous response is kicking in to fight or flight, and they're thinking. So when they see everybody get excited, they get even more excited.
And like Lisa mentioned earlier, if there's medical people around, maybe give them the forefront, to give them a little space and take direction. I like to say, if you're in charge, take charge. So you guys can look around at the 30 or 40 people maybe that are here right now, and you know what this drop zone looks like on a super busy day. So we're here to learn something, and you guys can rely on each other if something happens, right? So it may not be that there's a doctor or a nurse or a medic or someone around, but if you've had some little bit of instruction, and that's what you have to go with, and start giving people a little bit of direction. Most everybody knows what to do in emergency. They're just waiting for someone to remind them. Like, hey, don't move him. Leave his rig on. He's okay, etc. So just on that, baby steps at first. And what's the first thing that we're going to do, right? If we see somebody take a good hit, we can call 911 and get them coming. Like, we respond to emergencies all the time, and we assess our patient, we take vitals, we do all this different stuff, and then they sign a refusal, and they go home, and we go home. And it doesn't cost anybody anything, right? Except a little bit of time. So that's where judgment starts.
And this is really super important, because we may see somebody land and they're down, and we may think it's a simple injury, but what we don't know is what's going on the inside. We don't know if their lungs collapse. We don't know if they have internal bleeding. We don't know, the femur fracture, and stuff. So it is so important. Call 911. Let them do an assessment. If they want to, refuse or they can even downgrade it to like a BLS unit or whatever, like a transfer, but always call 911 if there's any doubt, because we can't see what's going on inside the body. And I've responded to several people where they basically looked okay and wind up finding out that they were really sick.
And just trust your intuition, right? A lot of this is, if the thought crosses your mind, should I call 911? Yeah, you know, you have nothing to lose. So go ahead and get them started. And if you don't need them, they get on scene and do their thing and leave. It's not a big deal. They're getting paid, they'll be okay. Also, call 911 and then either go get or send someone to go get the first aid kit that we have here. It's kept in Cam's office in Manifest. So we'll
A lot
grab
of times
that.
we regularly go through it and check the items, make sure that we have what we need. We let Cam know. So a lot of us go through that first aid kit. So take that out with you.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of,
Quick question, really quick about 911. Whose responsibility specifically here, and I don't know, I know Laura's here, whose responsibility is it to call 911? Do we have to,
Anybody with a phone?
so
I'll take
anybody
that,
with a
yeah.
phone, or do we
Anybody.
have to rely
First
that
person
we're?
that sees them.
Okay.
First person that sees something that looks like this, you know, this person is not getting up, or the first that gets there and sees that they're hurt and not responding or whatever, the quicker the better.
So we could basically make that decision out there without having to feel the need to come all the way back here, tell Manifest and wait that extra
Absolutely.
minutes.
You know, that's time, that's valuable time.
None of us really have them. So it becomes a relay thing, and it is, you know, like a Manifest or something here. And I think everybody, jumpers included, would be really good with that. But if you're out there with a phone and you see something that warrants calling 911,
You know how many people call about the same accident?
yeah, call us up.
And that's okay,
It's,
yeah.
it's inundated, people driving by and they'll call them.
If dispatch here in Pasco County gets 30 calls for a skydiver down at the same time, they're gonna figure it out and they're gonna send who they need to send, so. Sir,
Manifest needs to know, because Lori may have to get a hold of the pilots, and they may be calling a helicopter and they wanna clear the air.
letting Manifest know is super, super important, but calling 911 and getting responders here is the priority. And then as soon as we can, you know, I'm sure Manifest is gonna know.
Manifest usually knows
Pretty quick.
quickly, just based on the fact that our flight line, if it happens here, our flight line is pretty aware of it happening, and they usually radio to Manifest. Another aspect of getting in touch with Manifest is they have the registration sheet, which has critical information, age, weight, emergency contact information, stuff like that. So that gets printed up in Manifest, and we can give that to the paramedics when they get here. So that's part of our procedure as well. But they're pretty quick to let Manifest know.
And EMS will always respond before the helicopter, so there's plenty of notice with that too, for clearing airspace and jumpers and things like that.
Yes. And to speak just a little more on that point, trauma is, especially blunt trauma, is widely regarded as a surgical disease. So what that person needs is to get to a hospital. And as important as Manifest is, and that they have all the information, getting someone here that can get them to the hospital is the most critical thing. It's called the golden hour. After that first hour, outcomes are a lot poor, so.
We may get to slides, we'll get through quickly because we're already addressing something, but since it's in my mind, I have to say it before I forget it. I've seen this several times. Someone's on the ground and they're like, get him some water, get him something. Do not give anybody anything to eat or drink. That could affect them having surgery. So if they're, hurt and they require surgery, if they've recently had something, they won't do it. That could delay it because they're at risk for aspiration. So anything in their stomach could go in their lungs, and they could get pneumonia and a lot of other things. So having something to eat or drink right before, could delay surgery. So do not ever give them anything to eat or drink.
Yeah.
Not even water.
Absolutely.
Or especially, maybe we can make an exception.
If it's me, bring me beer. So we're just scratching the surface, right? Like, this is what we need to do first. Calm yourself down, take some baby steps, call 911, and grab the first aid kit. But what do we actually do when we get to that patient? Like I said, it's just to start talking to them, right? Come up generally toward their head and kind of get them to calm down and get them to stay still. Because a lot of people, there's pride to it, right? Like, you took a bad landing or something happened and you're like, you want to get up and show everybody that you're okay so they don't worry. You also want to show people that you're a tough dude, right? But just come up, talk to this person. Hey man, relax. Hey, how are you doing, don't move your head around, stay still. Because we've all been there, you get hurt, and unless it's stepping on Legos or stubbing your toe in the corner of the wall, you don't feel it immediately. But if it's like a real, crash or something, all kinds of adrenaline, and people try to walk on broken legs. So encourage that person to stay still, calm them down, and there's only one way to lead, but that's by example. So if you calm yourself, tell them to chill out, and then start your ABCs, right? Your assessment. ABC is super simple. So airway, breathing, circulation, and C-spine. In that order. If anybody here has medical training, you know that there's different orders for different situations, but for simplicity, we'll just stay with the ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, circulation, and C-spine.
What's C-spine? What's that mean?
And we'll talk about it.
We're gonna get into that.
Absolutely. But so we start with airway and breathing, right? And that whole problem can be solved by asking someone a question. It's not, if I say, hey Blair, how are you? And he responds, I'm good. He's good. I know his airway is open, and I know he's breathing.
We will not start doing CPR on him.
Right. So airway and breathing are done because he's answering questions. Circulation, we're just gonna look for life-threatening bleeding, right? Like if he's all scraped up, I don't really care. Road rash doesn't matter to me.
It
Minor,
matters to me, but not.
yeah. Lisa will care about you.
I'll wrap
Unless-
you all up and clean you up peroxide and all that stuff, and he'll say, okay, you take care of it.
Thank you.
That's too much. So yeah, airway, breathing, circulation. If those things are good, if they're talking to you and they're not bleeding out, slow down, right? Do less. Don't move them. Calm them down. And hold their head still. So when we talk about C-spine, it's just keeping their entire spine basically in as straight of a line as possible. We're only going to remove helmets if that person is not talking, is not breathing. We don't know if they have an airway. So how these things go in order, A, B, C, that's the priority. If your airway's not open, I'm sorry about your spine, buddy, but I got to open your airway, right? So then we're going to remove a helmet, and we're going to keep going. Anything that you see wrong with the ABCs, you fix immediately in the order that you find them. If you need to, right, I get you in 1 second. If you need to open an airway, you open it. If they're not breathing and you know how to give rescue breaths, then you can do that. And if they're bleeding, you stop the bleeding immediately. These things are fixed right now because there's not going to be a later for those people. You have a question?
Just wanted to comment on the C-spine, you clarified, keeping the spine straight, you don't wanna move them to make them straight.
Right, absolutely. We'll address it in more detail in just a second, but essentially it comes down to doing less, and that's like a common theme. If someone is down in the position you find them, leave them more or less in that position unless it's critical to save their life.
Sometimes when people get hurt, they vomit, so it may be important to turn them on their side at that time so that it can go out so that it doesn't go back and they don't aspirate on that. So that's one opportunity where you would move them a little bit.
Yeah, that's an airway problem. If
Yeah.
there's a bunch of vomit in your throat, then you're not going to be breathing very well.
So this is what I was talking about, those valuable, it could be valuable seconds or minutes, like if we get a chance to talk to somebody, they could be totally conscious the whole time. We can say, are you okay? Like we said, are you hurt anywhere? The quick head to toe assessment, typically what I do is because people are gonna try to move, or the last ones I responded to, the guy said, oh, it's just my leg strap that's hurting. He did not think anything was broke. So I will typically kind of start with my hands and just move down their, body, like kind of move down, does this hurt, does this hurt, does this hurt? Try to get an idea, because when EMS gets there, I'm gonna say they had some pain, on the right hip, they think it's this, just something to be looking for, it could be the arm up here or whatever, but I just gently touch and let me know if this hurts. If they're awake and you can talk to them. This is another big one, is allergies. They're going to be getting in the EMS and they're starting IVs, and they could be giving medications, painkillers especially. if they have allergic reactions, it's, you ask them, are you allergic to anything? Just so to let the EMS know they have this allergy. Also, if they're unresponsive, if say they're talking to you and then they go unresponsive, that's something you could give, because they're gonna be going straight to the hospital. And we treat injuries with just standard pain medicines, but if it's an open injury, antibiotics we're giving right away. So if they have allergies to antibiotics and things like that, any information that we can get and give to EMS is really helpful. So medications, this one's a really big one. Laz will point out in a couple slides later. Many of our patients, our jumpers here, may be on blood thinners for various reasons, from having history of clots to having heart irregular rhythms. So they're on blood thinners for many of these reasons. That is like a huge, and they still jump. So, it's really important to know if they're on these medications, because even if they say they're okay and they want to get up, they could really have the potential for internal bleeding. Anybody on a blood thinner, even people like that take an aspirin a day, will have more bleeding than someone else would.
So I actually have a crossover from motorsports that we do. This might be something we want to work on for all of us. We put stickers on everyone's helmets that have allergies and blood types. Like a lot of people with their race suits have their blood type on their suits. We might want to maybe find somebody who can do spray vinyl and get a sticker for your helmet.
So my
that's
helmet is
allergies
really
and stuff
cool,
like that.
and I am not putting that sticker on my helmet.
Roll one,
But
two.
I do have an idea as we were talking. We all do those waivers all the time, and we sign and sign and sign a lot of meaningless stuff. But what if we added on there, if we have allergies on our waiver, that every one of us has to do to jump? What if we put an allergy? Also, something like a preference. I'm the nurse and thinking ahead of the person all the way through. I'm thinking, oh, I know this person lives in Tampa. They're going to fly him out to Lakeland. It's going to be a long drive. They're elderly. Or I'm thinking, this person's going to Tampa. Generally, you have to pay to park there. Or different things. I'm thinking, but if you have a preference to a hospital. Now, they will always decide by emergency where they're going to take you first, but if you had, it may not be a life and death. You may have a preference to go to a hospital. Put that. So maybe we could add some type of a extra part into the, our signing thing of if we have allergies, if we're taking medications, and where we would want to be taken.
Yeah, we can. That's definitely a topic.
And
for
blood type too.
Further discussion.
But if you're a trauma, they're going to give you O negative, right? So it doesn't even matter, honestly. They have trauma blood that they're going to rapid infuse, so that would only be later on.
Yeah. So we'll ask them about their history. We don't want to know, things that necessarily are important, like they had shingles once, So if they've had recent surgeries or if they have medical conditions, basically as much information you can get out of this person about their history, in case they do lose consciousness. These are all things we can write down, and it'll also shorten the amount of time that EMS is on scene. Last oral intake sounds kind of silly, but it's super important, right? Like Lisa said, if they have anything in their stomach, that's going to have to be handled in the hospital before they go to surgery. So ask them when they ate, what they ate, and don't give them anything to eat or drink, right? Don't feed the dragons. And then events leading to the incident is basically the mechanism. How far did they fall? How fast were they going? Did they lose consciousness? Were they acting strangely? So
that's really important. When they respond to car accidents and everything, it's, was it a front impact? Was it a side impact? Did they turn and they hit this side? Those types of things. So the person that saw the clear list, most clearly give that description, because that will really help EMS.
keep in mind that every time somebody hits the ground out here, it's like a car accident, right? A really bad car accident with no seatbelt and they rolled over. So you take it for granted because you see a lot of people take bad landings, but these are a lot of forces that we're putting on the body that it's not designed for. There's nothing natural about skydiving. So even what looks minor, it's just unnatural the way that the body's hitting the ground and things are happening. So before it was the ABCs, right? The very basics, ABCs. And then after that, it's taken care of, sample. So if you could remember to take a free sample, now we're doing good. I'm not the smartest man in the world, so I use like mnemonic devices and stuff. Sample helps me remember it. If you guys have a different way of remembering this information, by all means. But that's pretty much it for that one. And just a little bit more about what Lisa was saying. We're all about releasing the dragons, not so much about feeding the dragons. So again, we feel bad for our friend, our buddy, someone we know. We want to give them shade and water, but do less. And then we also, I don't want to talk a lot about things not to do, but there's some common things, right? So being emotional naturally, that's not going to help you be effective. Fearing inaction, like not everybody has to do everything. Just take a step back and remember to stay calm. Removing gear immediately is always going to be a big no-no unless we're addressing the ABCs. And then distracting orthopedic injuries, I think, is really big. So you go out there and your buddy that you hang out with and jump with, and you know his family, his leg is on backward, or his femurs are broken, etc. I don't care about your femurs, and I don't care about your broken this or that. If your foot's on backwards, like airway, breathing, circulation. Be still. Let's start talking. Hey man, calm down. Because like we said, trauma is all about surgery. Like, there's nothing that we're really gonna do unless you're trained. You can pull traction on the femur or something like that. But really, there's no rush to get this person's gear off, right? Like nobody wants to get their jumpsuit cut off of them by EMS. Nobody wants to have their rig cut. Absolutely. But we have probably 10 or 15 minutes before they show up. And if you feel that patient feels like it's absolutely necessary, then the last 5 minutes maybe can be spent removing gear carefully, not the first 5 minutes. Airway, breathing, circulation, and be still.
So the removal of the impaled objects. This is interesting. When I had a trauma come in one night that a guy was on a stretcher flown in with the knife still in. Like he was stabbed in his heart, the knife was still there, and it was, you think that's crazy. As a matter of fact, they had to get a different helicopter because the knife was so big that they didn't have enough clearance. So you never want to remove an impaled object, because even though it's in there and it looks awful, it may be stopping the bleeding. As soon as you would take that out, you would not be able to stop the bleeding. So there are things around here that people can get impaled with and have parts of them. Don't take them out until, let EMS do that.
Yeah, never take it out, no matter what it is, how big it is. Just leave it in there and let somebody else figure it out. Because if they start bleeding, there's not a lot that you're going to be able to do about it. All right, so that really, the first half of this whole slideshow ending here is going to be most of the calls or most of the incidents here, right? It's orthopedic injuries, people busting up arms and legs, maybe backs, but for the most part, they're alive, right? Their airways open, breathing, circulation. So if we can remember that stuff, staying calm, ABCs, and a sample history, we're gonna be good for most of the things that happen here. The rest of it is when things go wrong, right? Z skills. So we can kind of go over how to open an airway, rescue breathing, chest compressions, bleeding control, C-spine management is another thing we'll talk about, and then rig and helmet removal, which is like a last resort.
I'll let you do it.
Okay, so airway management, if you get to someone and they're not conscious, like you could do this with yourself, right? If you put your chin on your chest and just breathe normally, it's hard for me to talk because my airway's closed, right? So for whatever reason someone loses consciousness under canopy, they're going to be flying like this the whole time. Or if they're on the ground and they're unconscious or they're hurt and their airway is closed, gently you can move their head to like the neutral plane, right? If that's not enough, for people that are possible spinal injuries, which is going to be anyone here that takes a hard landing, we'd like to do a jaw thrust. Basically, if you turn yourself into a snook and just give yourself an underbite like that, it'll open your airway. It takes practice and training, and we're not going to get into it a lot. But when in doubt, and it's like I said, it's someone who doesn't have an airway, I'm really sorry about your spinal injury, buddy, but I'm going to open your airway. If all you remember how to do is just a chin lift, the further up your chin is, the more open your airway is. It feels uncomfortable, and it's kind of counterintuitive, but it aligns the different axes of your airway. And if you get to someone, you don't know if they're breathing, you don't know if their airway's open, just tilt their chin, and airway's done, right?
So rescue breathing, honestly, this is really, we're not really recommending this a lot anymore between COVID and all the other things, and just what we found, and all the studies show that CPR, chest compressions, is really the most important thing. So we added this. If there's two people and they're experienced and they can go back and forth and, you know, rotate, but really this delays care, and they found that the most effective is the hands on the chest.
If there, and anyone here who's medical will probably understand, there are situations where someone may not be breathing but have a pulse. Those situations are fairly rare, especially by the time you get to them. But if I feel that someone has a pulse and they're just not breathing, I'll probably do the rescue breaths. But if you assess someone and they don't have an airway, they're not breathing, just get on their chest right away. So this is what American Heart recommends, hands-only CPR. And this is by no means a CPR course, right? Like, you guys aren't gonna get everything you need. But if you're the only one there, you know, it's your time to shine. So.
And there should be two people, because if you've ever done CPR, it's really exhausting, so you should relieve each other. But, you know, you can see like the hand, how you know, where you go like in the middle area, and the rate should be at least 100. And if you think of a song like Staying Alive, if you were ever doing CPR, or another one, Bites the Dust, like they're really good songs to think of, like do, you know, like if you're doing that to that compression, like I know it'd be weird that you'd be singing while you're doing CPR, but the compression, effective compression rate and depth is most important, or else it's useless.
Is hitting the high note of Staying Alive make it better?
First I was afraid, I was petrified.
No, that's too slow.
The baseline is important on those songs.
Yeah.
So bleeding control, it is, I would say, fairly rare in blunt trauma that you see life-threatening bleeding. Most of the time it's going to be abrasions or superficial cuts. But if you do see some bleeding that looks severe, this is the order that we're going to try to control it in, right? Direct pressure and elevate. If you bring that above the level of the heart, arteries don't have valves, so it's going to be hard to get blood to that extremity, right? If you hold your arms above your head long enough, your hands start to like tingle, yeah? So direct pressure, elevate, pressure bandage, and then apply a tourniquet. Not only is it just the least invasive to the most invasive, but also like you may not have a tourniquet handy, or it's going to take you a couple seconds to make your own and rig it up, but I can apply direct pressure right now with my hands, right? And I can elevate someone's limb immediately. So this is the order of bleeding control. Not really a whole lot to it. We can go over how to apply a tourniquet. We have, these are called CATs. These are combat action tourniquets. We have 2 in the first aid kit, but you're not jumping with this, right? John, come up here. You're not jumping with this, but if it comes out to the landing area quick enough, then you can use it. It's very simple, and it comes with little directions. You put it around whatever part of this person is hurt, at least 2 inches above where they're bleeding. You pull it real tight, and then the stick of it, you just start twisting it, and it shortens up the circumference, so it makes it very tight, and then you just slide it into the little holder. The rest, you can leave it dangling, doesn't matter. And in this part, we write the time. Once the tourniquet's applied, we never take it off in the field. And for all different reasons that don't really matter, just don't take it off. And if you feel like maybe I didn't need to put that on, put it on. A lot of studies have come out that tourniquets are not causing the type of damage or the amount of limb loss that people fear. So if you have a tourniquet and this person hasn't stopped bleeding, go ahead and put it on.
I think it's like 120 minutes or something like that. It would never be that long here, so it's okay to put it
Yeah,
on.
we got one more. And then since we don't jump with this a lot, you may land off. Something may happen where you have quite a ways to go until somebody gets to you. I'll just show you guys real quick kind of how to fashion tourniquet with a t-shirt and a stick. If you don't have a stick, it's not super important. It's called like a cravat and stick or stick and rag, whatever. But I think unless you're doing sands jumps, everybody has a t-shirt when they jump, right? Another good reason not to jump naked. I'm just kidding. So basically, all you have to do here, if it's long enough, you can tie an overhand knot, and that's outstanding. And then you put your stick put another overhand knot if it's long enough and you start twisting, yeah? This is gonna shorten it up and it's gonna make it tight. If you don't have all of that, you just wrap it around whatever limb is bleeding and you just start twisting as hard as you can, as tight as you can. This is gonna suck because you're gonna have to hold this until EMS gets there or the real tourniquet gets there, right? And then you put it proximal, closer to them, and this could come off. With that said, these makeshift ones are great to slow the bleeding, but you're not gonna stop bleeding with this, right? It's better than nothing. So if we can slow the bleeding until you get a real tourniquet, and this is something that like you could practice it if you don't think I'm telling the truth or whatever, just grab your t-shirt and start twisting. It's gonna get real tight, his hand will fall asleep, and the bleeding should stop. Thank you, sir. C-spine management?
I like to do that.
Yeah?
I like
Okay.
to do
So basically, this is like the neutral plane, right? This is the long axis of the body. Someone's spine is in a straight line. With big hands, if you can hold their head and just talk to them and keep them calm, basically this is all I'm talking about. Usually, if they have a rig on, they're gonna be kind of to the side, right? Support their head a little bit, but it's not critical that we get them flat on their back. Just leave them in the position found. All C-spine comes down to is not moving them, not manipulating their spine and any injuries that they already have. And then this is a big one for me because I've seen it a lot. Rig and helmet removal, unless there's an airway or breathing problem, is really not important at all. So let's take our time before we get to that stuff, right? And this is where not fearing in action is important because everybody's like, yo, I can do stuff. I can undo leg straps. I can undo chest strap. I can get their rig off. Just don't. Like, you're more helpful by standing by if you're needed and doing a little bit less. So ask yourself some questions. Basically, if their ABCs are not in peril, then leave their stuff on for now. And if this person really feels like they want their stuff off, say, okay, let's go slow. Can you take off your own helmet? Can you take off your own rig? Because if I'm removing someone's helmet, I have no idea if I'm causing them pain or if things are moving around. But if they're able and they really, I mean, you can't stop someone from doing what they want to. You can try, you can use reason and say, hey man, like slow down, let's take a second.
I can give you an example.
Yeah.
So I was in the ER one night and I had a man that was on the backboard and the cervical, everything, and I kept telling him he couldn't move. And he was fighting me the whole time. And I was explaining to him he could be paralyzed and all this stuff. And finally I said to him, if you keep doing that, you may never be able to use your penis again.
Yeah.
He wouldn't move when I told him he could move. And he was like, are you sure it's okay? So sometimes you have to talk. Like, I mentioned that and he was completely fine with that, with not moving. So.
What was I saying?
I'm sorry.
You were saying how you're gonna use that in the field.
We're very focused on the important stuff.
Okay.
Oh, but that's awesome. But seriously, if someone can take off their own stuff and they're insistent on it, then let them, because they may think they're fine. You go take off their helmet and realize that they have shooting pain down their neck, and they're like, oh, that's a bad idea, let me go ahead and stop. So, steps for that. When possible, wait for EMS. If we do, for some reason, have to remove someone's helmet, it's very much a two-person job. One person's gonna slide their hands up their neck, up around their face, and to hold their head. The other person, as much as they can, is gonna open that helmet and then slide it, wiggle it real slow, up and off of their head, right? This is like the perfect example, and it won't look like this, but that's okay. Because if we're doing this, that person doesn't have an airway, right? Or they're not breathing properly. So this is like the best way to do it, but it doesn't always work out. Rig removal, which happens like very quickly, and as soon as someone is, you know, they hit the ground, everybody starts taking the rig off and all this. Let's slow down with that one. But if you do want to do it, there's kind of a way that you can without moving them a whole lot. First, undo their legs and chest straps. Stubbs was super helpful with this. He's a great sport. Undo their legs and chest straps, and then whichever side they're laying on, the side that is not on the ground, if you can snake their arm, if it's not broken to pieces, you can snake their arm through their arm strap, through the risers, then you have that side loose. then you can start to rotate it because the leg straps are off, the chest strap is off. You can start to rotate it around their head, right? And very slowly, in the long axis of the body, you can start to take that off without really manipulating them a whole lot. And this is, so this was a one-man job because I was by myself with Stubbs, which is scary. But, you know, with more people, it becomes a lot easier, and then you just lay them flat, and this is all it is to it. You know what I mean? There is a way for it to happen safely. This is, let's see, Lisa?
So, confused and combative patients, you know, like I said, it's just their reaction. They are, you know, they may have an altered mental status, they may have a head injury, you know, they may be, like, you know, even Les said, they just may be embarrassed and want to jump up because, you know, if nobody likes that everyone's running around them saying, are you okay? You know, if they're like, so, you know, just holding them down, just trying to talk to them, or just really, you know, just trying to reason with them. But it may even require more people to even be around and
Yeah, and
you know, help them down with her.
as much as you can, try to catch this fly with sugar or whatever that thing is, because there's a line between helping and hurting, right? Like restraining someone who's hurt, at some point you just may be better off kind of walking them around or trying to calm them down, but it's hard. Head injury patients are super hard to deal with. So I was in a Mayday situation a couple years ago. A buddy of mine went down, and we practice that stuff all the time, right? Firefighter safety, firefighter removal, all this kind of stuff. What I did not ever consider until that day is that the guy that I'm trying to help might really want to fist fight me. Like he thinks I'm trying to hurt him. He thinks I'm, you know, doing something bad. So we wrestled this guy into a sked basically. This might happen with your best buddy that you jump with all the time. You guys are best friends, but if he hits his head, you know, he's not going to act the same. So just things to anticipate. I can't tell you exactly how to treat everyone because it'll always be different. But
You know, they may be thinking of surviving too, and they're trying to fight their way, you know, so they're difficult. Whatever you can use, if it's reasoning or even just a reminder or threatening them with their penis, whatever it takes.
over.
So, some accident symptoms not to ignore, delayed symptoms, you know, headache could be the sign of a bleed in the brain. You know, you can hit your head one way and your brain can actually like hit the front of your head, so it's like, what's it, contra-coup, what do we used to call it? Yeah. So there's all kinds of head injuries and things that we cannot even see what's going on, and they could be acting perfectly normal, but you know, they may call an hour later and say, I've got this headache that's crazy. Tell them to go to the hospital. They need to get a CAT scan if anybody asks. Or if they say, I'm fine, and keep jumping, and then all of a sudden develop these things. Just, you know, make sure that, you know, they are aware. But if they start talking about headaches or different things, they may have a bleed, you know, shoulder pain, they could have, you know, it could be the simple ice and elevate and things like that. But, you know, things that they're going to feel later. When we get excited, we don't feel anything. You know, after that night of going home and you go to get in bed and everything hurts or you're, you know, something. So once that excitement wears off, that's when people start feeling things.
Again, like skydiving is not natural. The injuries that occur out here, even though sometimes they look simple, none of this is natural. So keep your suspicion high. We see a lot of people that take bad landings and are fine, but this is, I don't try to be dramatic, you know what I mean? But like the fact is that if you're not with a high index of suspicion that this person could be seriously hurt, you're gonna miss it. You know, there's gonna be one or two people that are more hurt, and you know, they're gonna be like, oh, I'm fine, go home with a punctured lung, you know, tension pneumo or something like that. John and I were in flight 1, and a dude broke his back and was ready to get on the next load. So, but it happens, right? Just be an advocate for people that get hurt because they probably want to keep jumping.
Yeah, try to talk reasonance with them. Like, you can jump tomorrow, just take it easy today, you know? Better to be safe than sorry. So we talked about that.
Yeah, we covered this pretty well already. Just leave it in. I'll talk about this one, yeah. So varicose veins or other pre-existing conditions, right? Like there are people in their 20s, 30s that for whatever reason have a lot of varicose veins in their legs. If this person slides in, you can't really see it here, but there's a bunch of varicose veins. This person slides in a normal landing and hits a stick, that could cause life-threatening injury. And it's not, that could be life-threatening bleeding, right? It doesn't look spectacular, they don't tumble, nothing. But what goes from basically a little cut or an abrasion to the rest of us, this person has venous bleeding coming out of their leg. And there's other people, hemophiliacs, people on blood thinners, people with pre-existing injuries. So if you see somebody take a little bit of a spill or a landing, and maybe you see a little blood on their jumpsuit or on their pants, like, hey man, let's take a look at that. And you know, just like I said, high index of suspicion and trying to look out for each other.
So Laz almost lost a friend here. I had to text him because I read this and I said to him, what do you mean by, you know, what is your age for this special consideration of these? And he wrote me back very nicely and said 55, and then I wrote him back and said, yeah, I'm still offended.
If I can jump in to defend myself, Hillsborough County Uniform Trauma Protocol says that 55 and over, you get 1 point toward a trauma alert. 2 points and you're a helicopter ride, right? So that's
So
why
we're
I said
already,
that.
any of us 55 and up, we're already one
You're-
point away from the helicopter.
you're halfway there.
Okay. So, because he so nicely cleared it up and said he didn't think I looked 55, I've forgiven him. But I actually had to text him on this one when I got to this slide. But we do have these considerations, like we said, you know, with age comes different heart arrhythmias. You know, we have our AFib people that are in this rhythm, so they're on these blood thinners and Coumadin and all these different things, high blood pressure, you know, all these things, at risk for stroke, many other things. So we do need to keep a higher suspicion, just be looking out. But not even landing or skydiving related. I mean, you know, Captain Fun had a heart attack here. You know, early activation, we don't have an AED here. I know we've kind of talked about it, but, you know, our patients could go into cardiac arrest. They could have a stroke. They're just things, you know, you see your friend that ain't acting right, and he hasn't had 5 years already, you know, hey, so-and-so's not acting right. They're repeating the same thing over and over. Or somebody just came to me and they're smiling and half their face is up and half of it is down. You know, don't just brush that off. That needs to be alerted. You know, you notice that someone's not acting right. Didn't you just say someone in an airplane or something? Were you
Oh,
telling me?
John was telling us.
Yeah, John.
There was someone who had low blood sugar or something. We weren't sure if it was the leg straps or there was a wingsuiter in the back, and half the plane's getting out and this guy's zonked out, you know, so.
Just be aware. You know, we're all here to look out for each other.
You guys have been awesome. We appreciate you paying attention, and me especially. This is all I have for you guys. Like, I can't teach you anything about skydiving, but if at any time you want to like talk about how to help people or first response, like, for sure, I would love to. At least I can feel useful.
I'm always willing to wrap and clean and do those kind of things, but I have to tell, Laz did an amazing job on this presentation. Last year I did a talk and I was so wordy. I was like, when I got this, I'm like, oh God, yours was actually fun. So he did an amazing job on this, so thank you. Any other questions?
Laz,
Sir.
I know the subject doesn't want to be talked about, but
Okay.
fatalities.
Yeah.
Should we talk about fatalities? I think we should.
Yeah. Okay. We can talk about it. What do you want to talk about?
They're gonna happen and they happen.
Yeah. So.
And how do you react when it's somebody that you know?
Yeah.
When you're dealing with fatalities, they're not pretty.
And at this point, it's worse for us
Yes.
because
So,
the person's already
We've
gone.
had 2 this year, and one of them was possibly a fatality, but he survived because of his student.
Sure.
Saved his life.
Sure.
So, when you run up on this stuff, yeah, you want to help, and everybody's is anxious to help, and that's important. But when you have obvious fatalities, that's hard not to do something. And in our case, we start doing CPR, and when we do, it's going to be continuous now until we're told to stop. So getting ready for something like that never will happen. I spent 30 years dealing with dead people. Well, people today that aren't used to this are going to react really bad. And when you see somebody that you know that's unconscious and they're agonal breathing and it's not what you expect to see. And now what do you do when it's Paul Wilson? What are you going to do? That's when you have to learn these things that it might not be us around there. Now it's, do you know that guy, what he needed at the beginning was his head positioned right? That was what saved his life. Well, if you don't know this, not doing that could have killed him.
So I'll answer this kind of in two different phases, right? The first part is the response. Like if we see someone that we know and care about, if I see any of you, God forbid, take a bad landing like that, I'm gonna respond in the exact same way that I told you guys we need to respond. I did see someone that I care about and I know personally.
That's you with 10 years.
Right, no, I understand. And the thing is, like, I'm gonna give you guys the example of being a pro, right? Like, try to go for this. I know it's not always the easy thing to do, but if you're running out there and this is someone that you know and care about, like, you embrace that you have these feelings, right? You care about people, but also embrace what I've been told by a lot of seasoned skydivers is if you're in the sport long enough, people you know are gonna get hurt. And if you're really in the sport long enough, people you know are probably gonna die.
Yep.
With that said, if you wanna help them, think about it and talk about it, right? Talk about it with your peers. These things are gonna happen. And if we think about it and talk about it regularly enough, maybe we'll be able to respond appropriately. We'll get out there and we won't be, we'll be upset, absolutely. I would be upset. I'd be, on the inside falling apart. But what we need to do is ABC, C-spine, get them to the hospital. If we go out there and they're not breathing, we start compressions, right? And any of us can start the chest compressions. If someone is an obvious death, right? There's a lot that goes into blunt trauma codes or deaths and why they're not successful. I would say my advice is, unless it's a decapitation or something of that nature where there is no fixing, go ahead and start chest compressions. And if it's not successful in the end, we tried, right? We did what we knew how to do. If I get to anyone that I know and they need chest compressions, they need an open airway, that's what I need to do. Like, this is my friend. If they were awake, they'd tell me, hey, Bobo, open my airway, do some chest compressions, right? Cry about it later. That kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with crying about it later. Like, I've had issues, you've had issues. Anyone that has dealt with seeing dead people on a regular basis is gonna have that. And the idea that we partake in something for leisure that is, life-threatening at times is unique, and we have our own things that we need to think about. The response, though, has to be independent of that emotion. Like I was saying earlier, calm down and don't become emotional. You have to be, to an extent, robotic. Yes, this is someone you know, and this is someone who you care about, but pretend that it's not. Because you're gonna do them a better service if you pretend that you don't know them, and you just treat them like a random person. Now, the second side of that is after it happens, right? Someone passes away or someone's severely injured and we're all torn up about it. Like, there's no doubt that that's gonna happen. You gotta talk about that stuff. And you have to find if you're not comfortable talking in a group setting, you have to find someone to pull aside and say, hey man, I'm real fucked up about this. Like, can we talk about this? Or, I don't know how to feel. I've never experienced this before, etc. Like, most people don't deal with death. And really the only way is to understand that it sucks. And we can help each other through it, but nobody can tell you how you're gonna feel or how you're gonna cope with it long term. What I will say is that a lot of people use negative coping mechanisms, you know what I mean? We know what these are: drugs, alcohol, dependencies, bad habits. And it's not because that person is weak or that person doesn't know what to do, it's just that sometimes there's not enough to help us deal with things, right? So if you guys are ever in that situation, and I'm not unique, people in the fire department aren't unique, we're all just a sample of the population. So it happens. What you have to do is try to reach out. Or if you see your buddy is hurting, if you see somebody, maybe they're putting on a smile and they're trying to ha-ha with everybody else, but your friends, right? I know when John is down, I know if there's something on somebody's mind, pull them aside separately, right? And really get after that, because if you don't let that stuff out, it's only gonna get worse. And the next time you see somebody, bounce or get hurt, it's all gonna come flooding back to you, and you may not be effective that time. You know what I mean? Like,
You don't need to be the guy running out there.
True.
If you're not that guy.
yeah, if you're not the guy,
If you're not that guy,
if you're not that guy that day,
10 people is
If
way too
you're,
many.
if you're just a body out there soaking up oxygen,
yeah.
probably better just to stay away from it. Let
Yeah.
the people who can do something.
Do less. Absolutely do less. If you're not that guy, if you don't have training, or you're just, if it's me and I have all this training experience, whatever, but I'm having a really bad day, or I'm, all messed up about what happened last week, I might not be that guy. Like, hey lads, come help us. No, I'm gonna call 911. Or, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you have to choose to sit out. Not because you want to, or because you don't care, but if my buddy's hurt, and I go out there, I'm a blubbering fool, like, I'm not helping him. I'm slowing things down.
Something we do in the hospital is if we have an unexpected death, or we've had patients that've been there for a long time and almost become our family and they die, we do a debrief. So we get the people involved in it, and we, afterwards kind of get them together, because like you said, there, everyone handles it differently. There's different attachments, and sometimes just getting together and talking about it, like, and maybe even saying, like, we did everything right and that is just still what happened, and we can't save everybody in the hospital, we can't save everybody here, but get the group together that was maybe really involved, in the first response afterwards, and get them together to be there and to talk it through with each other. It's something we have found helpful in the hospital.
I'll give you guys something just to know, is that rapid deceleration is one of the worst types of blunt trauma effects, right? Like, that tears apart different parts of your body, that if you landed badly in the operating room with everybody ready to go, they're not going to be able to do a lot for you. You know what I mean? So understand that someone getting hurt or someone passing away is not your fault. And we feel that way, right? We try to help and we're unsuccessful. It's my fault that it wasn't successful. No, these things happen, and that's reality. But it's hard to, actually embrace it and deal with it. So definitely, you want to just recap?
No, you got it.
Yeah? Okay. Hey. Sure.
If we're talking about like being that guy, I'm a non-practicing nurse, so I have training, I have experience, I could help, but like with some of the fatalities that have happened recently, I'm standing back going, there's so many people out there, I don't know if I can help, I don't wanna crowd the situation, but maybe I could help more than somebody else who isn't trained, so is there like a chain of command or a hierarchy or a way of knowing, like, who's, if I am on the scene, who's in charge, who has the most experience to like be able to say,
Absolutely.
and then how do I know, should I go help or should
It
I
might
just
be
stay
you.
back?
Right.
You might be the person
on the
that's
day, right?
So this happens all the time on what I do for a living, right? We get on scene. We're not the first ones on the scene. There could be a group of people, maybe lay people, who don't really have a lot of training. And like I said earlier in the slide, if you can give space for someone who's trained, great. But there's really no incident command out here, right? So what I said in the slide and what I like to tell newer people as they're coming up, if you're in charge, take charge, because nobody's going to know that you have all this training and all this knowledge, right? And maybe you're non-practicing, but the fact is that, like, you have experience and you have knowledge that is super useful. So I don't know you personally, and I don't know your personality, and I don't really like to talk a lot to people who I'm not familiar with either. But if there's an emergency and there's a chance for you to affect change in a good way, you become in charge, so take charge of that situation. Say, hey guys, this is, I'm a nurse or I'm a medic. Give me a little room, let me talk to the patient. And if there's somebody else there, maybe they were quiet too, maybe they have training as well. Now they feel comfortable to say, hey, thanks for saying that. I'm a medic or a physician, how can we do this together? But everyone has good intentions and everyone knows basically what to do. They know to stay out of your way, but they're waiting for someone to tell them. And that's what it comes down to. Until one person takes charge.
I think the drop zone here is really good too about knowing all of us and who's here. So, Lori, when they're in there and there's an injury, they know if Laz is here, they know if I'm here, James, like any of the nurses. They call overhead, they'll ask us. I've landed and they've taken my rig off to go respond to somebody, like waiting for me. So I think there's, it's a small family here. They know who's here. They know we're always willing to help. So, you can always call on us and, we're always going to be there. So
For anybody here, like you've had a little bit of training here, I can send you the slideshow. I can send you whatever notes you want. The fact is, you guys have made a huge commitment and spending your time out here on safety day. So it may be anybody here. You know, it's a whole bunch of people that you don't know what they know. Say, hey guys, let's keep them still. You know, pipe up and be that advocate for your friend or that person who you don't know. So especially if you have medical training, like sometimes.
Does this count now as medical training?
Sure. If this, you know, if Sean is the most experienced person with keeping somebody calm and, you know, airway breathing circulation, then he's that guy that day. So no one's in charge until someone takes charge. I don't know what's going on with the drop zone as far as AED or equipment. I will say that holding manual C-spine is plenty until EMS gets here. They have collars and all that. We don't need to apply. The thing about applying collars, right, is that you have to do it the right way or you're moving this person's head around. So I don't see a need for a C-collar here.
Some of them are, some of us are medical trained, we should have one.
Yeah, bring your own.
We could hold it and EMS will be here and then they're gonna put on their own anyway, cause they're gonna want to assess the back of the neck and all those things
Yeah.
probably anyway, so.
I'm not putting
I think us just holding it, you know, exactly where they were is even more important than putting something on.
What about the AED, do they have that device?
You mean here at the drop zone? You know, I don't know. They don't have it now. I know we've talked about it a couple of times. It's, you know, something we could bring up again.
What is that?
It's an automatic activation, automatic.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Al.
It's
Go ahead.
an automatic external defibrillator. So you apply it.
Paddles?
No, not the paddles. That's manual.
It's
So
hands-off, yeah.
it's with stickers. You put on someone's chest. The machine talks to you. It helps you go through
Interprets the
compressions.
rhythm.
Yeah, if they're in VFib or VTAC, it'll shock them when it says to shock them.
It'll tell you when to push the button. It'll tell you when to step back, analyzing rhythm, things like that.
It's outstanding to have. Right now we don't have it. So continuous chest compressions is the way
Thinking
to go.
about your average patient here versus walking through a Walmart or a YMCA, an AED would be nice, but it's
Yeah,
not as needed.
For
I'm not
trauma,
saying
the
it's
AED is
gonna
not,
hurt,
you know.
Yeah.
But for someone hanging around, our seasoned skydivers possibly, or anyone who may have an emergency.
Or we have
It would be
lots
nice
of
to have.
family members and stuff. I mean, they have AEDs now in all the stores. They have them in the schools, like elementary schools and everything. They have them in schools and everywhere now. So I mean, it's not bad to have.
If anybody wants to practice like removing a helmet or doing an assessment, removing a rig or anything like that, like, if I'm ever around, you want to do it, let's do it. You know, if you never do something, then you're never going to get good at it. But that's my spiel. Any other questions?
Thank you.